I will now just go through the presentation to give the highlights. So you will see that the period that we are talking about is from 2018-2019 financial year to 24-25 financial year. There are two broad mandates. The first one is to set and regularly review the remuneration and benefits of all state officers. Then the word there says to set, meaning that the Commission will review and set. And that is differentiated from the second mandate, which is to advise the national and county governments on remuneration and benefits of all other public officers. So the second one is distinguished by the word advise. The other one says to set. Advise has been, over the period, been a point of contention as to what it really means. And through court decisions, it has been clarified over and over again that the word advise is not in the literal sense, because the advice of the Commission is binding once it has been given. One is that all state organs must seek that advice. It's not optional, you must seek the advice. And once that advice is given, it is binding upon the institution in which the Commission advises on the remuneration and benefits. So that is broadly the mandate. Now, in discharging that mandate, the Constitution further spells out the principles by which the Commission will advise or set the remuneration and benefits. And there are 5 of them. 4 are spelled out in the Constitution, and the 5th is in the SRC Act of 2011. These principles, the first one is to ensure fiscal sustainability of the total public wage bill. Now, what does that really mean? When we talk about fiscal sustainability, it is then specified in the Public Finance Act, PFM Act, on what that means. And the PFM Act states that not more than 35% of revenue should be spent on the wage bill. So when we therefore talk about fiscal sustainability, we are saying that the wage bill should not be more than 35% of revenue. And when we talk about total public wage bill, that also means all the basic salaries, allowances, and any other financial obligations that is related to employment, meaning that it also includes both remunerative and facilitative allowances. So that entails the entire wage bill. What it does not include, the pension. Although pension actually is a cost to the government, but when it comes to computing what is the wage bill, it is not included in that definition. So even as we will be sharing shortly the numbers of the wage bill, just remember that pension is not in that number. If we included pension, it will actually be much, much more than the numbers I will be sharing shortly. So that is what it means in terms of fiscal sustainability of the total public wage bill. But it also means it must be affordable, because it's not just about being fiscally sustainable, but is it affordable? Affordable just means, do you have the money today? Fiscal sustainability means, can it be sustained in the long term? So when the Commission is advising on remuneration, the first thing that we will look at is whether the entity has the money. Do you have the money now? Is it in the budget? And sometimes it even goes beyond budget, because budget does not necessarily mean that there is money. It is a budget. So we must therefore interrogate that. Is there money allocated for that purpose, for that remuneration? And it's not just about now, we go beyond that and look at the financial position of the institutions. For example, when we are looking at state corporations, We will look at their financial statements for the last 3, 4, 5 years to look at whether indeed this institution is able not only to afford but to sustain any remuneration and benefits that the Commission may either set or advise. Now, the second principle is recognizing productivity and performance. What it actually means is that as the Commission is advising or setting, we must ask the question whether indeed the Commission is taking into account productivity and performance. It assumes that as we advise on remuneration, that actually that remuneration has performance and productivity. In other words, the public officer is performing and they are productive. That is why that remuneration is given. Without that, then it means that we are paying and there is no value for money. So that's a very critical thing that the people of Kenya put in the Constitution to basically say we want to ensure that as we are paying a public officer, that actually they are delivering what they are supposed to deliver, and that there is productivity in what they are doing. So this is one area that there is still a lot of work to be done, and I'll shortly share some of the statistics. Are we confident that there is performance and productivity in the pay that we advise or set? So that's an area that, there is still a lot of work to be done. The third principle is ensuring public services are able to attract and retain the requisite skills to execute their functions. So what this simply means is that the Commission must then put in place mechanisms to ensure that the remuneration enables attraction of the requisite skills. So what then the Commission has to do is to carry out salary market surveys to see what the market is paying, look at what the public service is paying, and whether indeed the remuneration enables government to attract and retain the skills that is required. So that's a very important part of what the Commission does. And in the SRC Act, that is more specified that the Commission must carry out labor market studies. So that's an obligation that the Commission must do in order to establish that the principle number 3 is adhered to. Number 4 talks about transparency and fairness. Transparency and fairness. Transparency simply means that the remuneration and benefits should be transparent. And transparency in two ways. One is from an internal perspective. It means that the pay within any institution should be transparent. Yeah, that anybody can say, how did you arrive at this pay? Then it is transparent to that extent. But it also means that the public have a right to know what a public officer is paid. Every public officer's pay is public. It should be public, and anyone has a right to actually ask what is being paid. This is not about pay of an individual. It is about the structure of pay. That is what the Constitution expects, that there is transparency. Then it also talks about fairness, and I want to explain fairness together with number 5, which is equal remuneration to persons for work of equal value. Principle number 5 is derived from the Employment Act. It is in the Employment Act. And it speaks very closely to the word of fairness. And if you look at the reason why this is important, to the extent that the citizens said it ought to be in the Constitution, it is because of the history behind remuneration and benefits in Kenya. Historically, what we had is a situation where there were many bodies, many institutions who are setting remuneration and benefits. And in that situation, what happened is that the country then ended up with remuneration and benefits that are very, very different. Today, as we even stand here to talk about our exit report, it is an area that still has a long way to go. Because historically we have about 5 broad remuneration structures in the public service. We have a remuneration structure for the civil service, we have one for teachers, we have one for security sector, we have another one for public universities, we have different structures for state corporations, broadly 2 broad structures, one for commercial, one for non-commercial. We have a different structure for commissions and institutional offices. And these structures are very different to the extent that if you take a job, let me use for example common jobs like a driver in the public service would earn a certain pay, but in the state corporations it's probably 2 or 3 times, and it is the same job. That's how unequal the pay is, right? And that is because of the history behind it. So what the Commission has been doing, and I will share with you, is to come up with a way to ensure that we address that equity over a period of time. So that if you have jobs that are common, like the ones I just gave an example, whether we are talking about, drivers or clerical staff, then the ideal is they ought to earn the same remuneration. So I'll share with you some of the milestones. It's not everything because you will see in the report the details. And I'll start with the first principle of fiscal sustainability of the total public wage bill. So over this period, the Commission has overseen progressive drop in the total public wage bill to total ordinary revenue ratio from 51.54% in the financial year 2017-18 to 46.64% in the financial year 22-23. This is projected to decline further to 39.22% in financial year 2023-2024. Now, this downward trend has been achieved in spite of an increase in the public wage bill in absolute amounts, which has risen from 785 billion in 2017-18 to 1 trillion in the financial year 21-22 and projected to grow to 1.17 trillion in the financial year 23-24. So while this increase is largely attributed to increase in employee numbers in education, health, and security sectors, the downward trend is attributed to strategic interventions by SRC in collaboration with other stakeholders. So the key point here is to note that the wage bill in absolute terms has continued to increase and is likely to continue increasing in the context of an increase in the population in the country. As a developing country, the population will continue to increase, and it means that the requirement for service delivery will continue, especially in the 3 sectors that I've just mentioned. And because of that, you will see that the absolute amount of wage bill is likely to continue to go up as long as we must deliver those services to the population. So the challenge is the ratio, that as we grow the absolute amount, then the ratio needs to come down. And the important thing of the ratio is as the country consumes more and more on the wage bill, it means that there is less resources available for development and other government priorities. And that is the tight balance that the Commission has had to work with in the last 6 years. How do we balance the fact that there has to be growth in absolute amount, but at the same time pay attention to the ratio so that we do not crowd out resources for development and other government priorities. So over this period, the Commission has taken strategic interventions to ensure that that balance is maintained. And I will therefore just take you through some of the key strategic interventions that the Commission has taken. And as I look at that, if you look at that graph, it's just to demonstrate the actual challenge of the wage bill. You will see in the blue is the PFM target of not more than 35%. And the red one will show you the wage bill trend, the one I just talked about, coming down from 51.54 to 46.64, and it's going down, projected to 39.22, may go to 36.02. And on the other hand, you will see in green the wage bill in absolute amounts, which has continued to increase from 785 all the way to 1.2 trillion, projected to 1.2 trillion. So that's the wage bill. Then if you look at revenue, it has also grown. So this is assuming that the revenue will grow to 2.9 trillion in 23-24, and that it will also grow in subsequent years. If the revenue does not grow at that rate, then obviously the projected ratio will come down. So that is the challenge. So what has the Commission done to address this challenge in the last 6 years? The first one is to do with the salary structures to ensure fiscally sustainable salary structures. So over these years, the Commission has continued to be cognizant of the high wage bill and the need to harmonize remuneration, economic situation attributed to COVID-19, and also the withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024 and other austerity measures. So in recognizing that, the Commission has over this period frozen salary structures for over 90% of state corporations and constitutional commissions and independent offices, both in the second and third review cycles. So those salary structures have largely remained frozen for that period. Then to cushion the public officers against the rise in cost of living, the salary freeze notwithstanding, there has been an average of 3% automatic annual increment in form of notch movement within the advised salary structures up to the maximum level. So apart from state corporations, there was a general salary freeze also in 2019 for all salary structures, whether for state officers, for other public officers, there was a freeze. Then as a result of the current withdrawal of the finance bill, again there has been a deferment of the increments that had been planned for this year. So that just goes to demonstrate that the Commission has to continuously respond to the economic situation and make decisions not to continuously increase the salary structures. The other one has been about streamlining allowances in the public service. So in 2019, the Commission started with a study to understand the allowances that exist in the public service. And the study identified 247 different allowances paid to public officers, which account for 48% of the total wage bill. Then the Commission then developed an allowances policy framework for the public service as part of implementing the second wage bill conference resolutions. So in 2021, SRC commenced a phased approach to streamlining management and administration of allowances. An estimated saving of 11.2 billion was realized as a result of implementing the allowances policy framework for the public service. That is from the singular action of abolishing a number of allowances. The other area is about rationalized expenditure through SRC advice. So on an ongoing basis, SRC receives requests for advice on salary reviews, collective bargaining, negotiations, bonuses, benefits, allowances, among others, and this happens on an ongoing basis. Between the financial year 2020-21 and 2023, the Commission received requests for advice amounting to 150.89 billion. The requests approved through SRC's advice reduced the amount to a low of 45.1 billion, hence releasing 1.57 billion to other key government priorities. What that simply means is that without SRC, the country would have spent the entire amount of 150.89 billion between that period. But because of the intervention of SRC, the fact that there is a commission, that advice then was rationalized to 45.1 billion, releasing 105.7 billion to other government priorities. On collective bargaining negotiations, SRC is credited of fostering industrial harmony in the public service institutions following implementation of the guidelines on bargaining negotiations in the public service. In the last 6 years, SRC revised the collective bargaining negotiation guidelines applicable in the public service to guide the process of seeking advice on collective bargaining negotiations. And during this period, the Commission provided advice on to 168 institutions from 2018 to 2024. The advice on collective bargaining negotiation ensures that the parameters outlined in the guidelines are adhered to. These guidelines is actually based on the principles that I earlier outlined. And what that means is that every time there is a collective bargaining negotiation, the Commission will advise on parameters based on the constitutional principle. A key one of these ones is to ensure affordability and fiscal sustainability. So we would not advise any collective bargaining negotiation to proceed until the Commission has analyzed and is satisfied that the institution can afford and can sustain that going forward. The other one is also to ensure that there is equity and fairness in remuneration, and that an institution will not just negotiate on the basis that they can afford without any regard to harmonization compared to other institutions. Because of those two parameters, you may have had many times, sometimes trade unions saying they are calling for disbandment of SRC. And that is the genesis of that. It is because the Commission has a responsibility to say no. If you cannot demonstrate that you can afford, if you cannot demonstrate that you can sustain, and if what is being negotiated would lead to further lack of harmonization in the pay in the public service. So those are the two things that the Commission has consistently done. The other one is in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Service. The Commission developed a memorandum on one body or entity to negotiate for government. This has culminated in a framework for collective bargaining in the public service. It is not yet implemented, but what the Commission has done is to ensure that it has been developed, and the objective is to ensure that there is a sectoral body that would look at what is being negotiated in different sectors to introduce harmony in what is happening and to ensure that the principles are adhered to. In addition, in collaboration with Kenya School of Government, the Commission developed a curriculum on collective bargaining negotiations. During the period, 588 public officers were trained on collective bargaining and labor relations in the financial year 21-22, 22-23. This capacity building has gone a long way to ensure that the constitutional principles are, one, understood by all the institutions, and that as management sits to negotiate, then they are aware of the principles behind any pay review in government. The other intervention, you will be aware that the Commission has held national wage bill conferences, and during this period, the 6 years, we have had 2 national wage bill conferences. In the first conference, which was held in 2019, these resolutions were adopted by the 8th summit, and they were implemented. Just a summary, and you will see in the full report, is that out of these resolutions, 12 were fully completed. 12 resolutions were fully completed, which is an 80% implementation. There are only 3 resolutions that we have carried them forward and were discussed in the second wage bill conference that happened a year ago. So those have been rolled over to the third wage bill conference. So the importance of the wage bill conference is the realization by the Commission that some of the drivers of the wage bill are not necessarily in the purview of the Commission. The Commission may not have the mandate in some of the drivers. For example, when it comes to increasing employee numbers, the Commission has no control, right? And that's a driver of the wage bill. When it comes to, for example, the organizational structures that are in every institution, which also drives the wage bill, the Commission does not have any control on organizational structures. So because of that realization, it is important that the Commission works in collaboration with key stakeholders to address those areas that are not in the direct purview of the Commission. So the Commission has therefore worked in collaboration with other stakeholders to address areas of the wage bill that are not directly within the mandate of the Commission. And you can see from this summary that they have been implemented 80% from the first wage bill conference. In the third wage bill conference, which was held in 2024, 10 resolutions were adopted with expected outcomes of realizing a wage bill to revenue ratio that will not exceed 35% by 2028. Is a very ambitious target, but based on the deliberations by all the stakeholders, it was agreed that it is achievable. The second principle of attraction and retention of requisite skills is that during the period, SRC undertook an international salary survey for state officers, a Kenya survey for other public officers, a survey for healthcare workers, and a survey on public service remuneration. Consequently, SRC set a market positioning on gross pay at 50th percentile. One then may ask, what is the significance of that? Why is it important? It is important because it is the first time that the Commission, one, looked at pay from a gross level. In other words, previously, whenever the Commission was advising on pay, it was looking at basic salary, but not the allowances. So it is the first time that the Commission has moved away from basic salary to gross pay. You will often hear public officers saying, this is my pay. But when you look at it, they're actually talking about basic salary. But remember what I said earlier, that on average, allowances is 48%. And in some institutions, it is even 200%. So we must move away from the conversation of saying pay is basic salary. Whenever anyone says this is my pay, it is important to ask, is that basic or gross pay? And you'll be surprised always that there is a lot that has not been said because allowances have been ignored. And yet, on average, say 48%. It can go to 200%. So it's always important to ask that question, gross pay, not basic salary. So that is the shift that this commission has done over this period, to shift the conversation and analysis away from basic salary to gross remuneration, because that is the true picture of what a public officer is actually paid. The second one was to set a market positioning at 50th percentile. By setting that target of 50th percentile, it means that that becomes the benchmark. Any institution whose pay has reached the market positioning, then there is no review until the other institutions catch up. So this market positioning is critical if government is to achieve equal pay for work of equal value. In other words, to allow those who are below to catch up before we can talk about increasing pay. So that is the significance of that 50th percentile market positioning. But having done all that, the commission then also undertook a study to see whether government is still able to attract and retain the requisite skills. And during this period, you will see the retention rate given there, that in 2018, the retention rate was 95%, 2020 at 90%, and 2022 at 99%. What does that mean is that government is able to retain, attract the requisite skills. In other words, the number of employees that exit the public service is just 1%, right? The retention is, of course, not all attributed to remuneration. Remuneration is one of the reasons, but in our study, it also reveals that there are other reasons for retention, such as job security, such as career growth, and the working environment. So those are the key drivers for the high retention, as you see there. But we also know that the high level of unemployment in the country also plays a part in that high retention. Then the question about productivity, which I mentioned was another key principle from the beginning. And here we are specific to labor productivity and as a driver of revenue growth. So labor productivity gains are a key route to sustainable economic growth, because it is about, one, it's doing more with less. Can we deliver more in the public service with less resources, or do more with what we have? It's to do with more outputs with less resources, therefore a lower wage bill to revenue ratio. And that is the link between productivity and revenue growth. It's also about accountability, generating value for money by efficient utilization of public resources. It asks the question whether the wage bill of 1 trillion, we can actually see the value that we get out of it. That's what it asks. And thirdly, it's about service delivery, producing quality outputs for the citizens. So when we look at that labor productivity, the question we ask ourselves is, where are we as a country on labor productivity? And you'll see from that table there, and this is based on the ILO study in 2021. The one for 2023, it's not any different. It is also about the same result. That in Africa, Kenya was 26 out of 55, globally 153 out of 189. Those statistics don't speak very well for a country that has very good talent. We know that Kenya is ranked highly in terms of the quality of talent that it produces. So we've got very good talent in Kenya. So the question is, why is our labor productivity low? And if our labor productivity was high, then the country stands to benefit a lot more, and the issue about the wage bill to revenue would also be addressed. So what has the Commission done in this respect over this period? So the Commission has launched a framework to recognize productivity and performance in the public service, and this was done pursuant to a resolution of the second wage bill conference, and the Commission has achieved the following. The framework has been implemented, and so far 24 institutions have been advised on performance incentives. In collaboration with Kenya School of Government, SRC developed a curriculum for KSG to train public officers on productivity. In collaboration with the National Productivity and Competitiveness Center, SRC piloted productivity measurement in 24 state corporations and 5 county governments. Also to report that as a result of the second wage bill conference, productivity has been mainstreamed in the performance contracting in the public service. And that is a very key achievement over this period. And as the Commission moves forward, it is now the issue about productivity is mainstreamed in the performance contracting in the public service, and it will be driven by the public service institutions that are responsible for performance management. And the Commission will continue to recognize performance and productivity as it is its mandate. So let me now move to the other principle of equity, fairness, transparency. So SRC deploys job evaluation as the methodology to assess the relative worth of jobs across the public service. Job evaluation results inform equitable grading structures, which in turn, along with salary structures, inform attendant remuneration structures. In the last 6 years, SRC evaluated 47,500 jobs and developed grading structures and attendant remuneration structures. Consequently, harmonization of remuneration will be achieved progressively. So just to explain very quickly what that means is that job evaluation now enables the Commission to develop salary structures that are based on a uniform methodology across the entire public service. So that when we talk of a grading of a job, it is uniform across. Once you achieve uniformity in the way the grading is done, then you can then move to equitable remuneration structures. The reason why we are saying it will be harmonized progressively is because the difference in pay is so huge that if today the Commission said let's harmonize, it is unaffordable. It is fairly expensive, and therefore it will be progressively harmonized over a period of time, but the Commission having then established the platform, the mechanisms upon which that harmonization will be realized over time. And during this period, one of the things the Commission has achieved is to acquire a job evaluation system which is known as IGES, to enable SRC to use one system as opposed to the previous outsourced 3 systems that we were using previously. So SRC has successfully migrated all the jobs that were evaluated in the second and third review cycle to IGES. So that's a very big accomplishment, because the system not only is standardized, but it is also cost effective. So let me now move to policy and legal framework. So during this period, the Commission has had very many court cases filed, and you'll see the number there, 118. Concluded 58. And one may ask, what is the importance of this? And remember, when I started, I talked about the responsibilities that Chapter 15 commissions have. One of those is to promote constitutionalism and to protect the sovereignty of the people of Kenya. How do we do that? We do that by ensuring that as and when the mandate of the Constitution is under attack, challenged by anyone, then we have an obligation to ensure that we take that through the legal process. So during this period, the judiciary has played a pivotal role in shaping and interpreting SRC's mandate through various judgments and legal precedents. These judicial decisions have not only clarified the scope and extent of SRC's powers, but reinforced SRC's constitutional and statutory authority. Governance and accountability is another accomplishment over the period. So SRC has endeavored to live by the principles of good governance, integrity, transparency, and accountability as enshrined in the Constitution. SRC was recognized for upholding good corporate governance and accountable financial reporting over this period. The key awards received are Fire Awards 2021 for consistently posting and qualified audit opinion, Fire Awards 2022 first runners-up in the category of constitutional commissions and independent offices, Fire Awards 2023 first runners-up in the category of constitutional commissions and independent offices under IPSAS accruals, and Champions of Governance Award 2022 Commission Sector Award. So let me share very quickly the future as I come to a close. So what's the future outlook? The future outlook is summarized in the slide that you see there. And the future outlook is about strategies to achieve 35% wage bill to revenue ratio. And it has 4 strategic pillars. The strategic pillar number 1 is to improve labor productivity. If we are more productive as a country, what we shall see is improved responsiveness to the private sector. We shall realize increased revenue to government from commercial state corporations. We shall see operational and cost efficiency in all public institutions. We shall have more enhanced accountability, efficient utilization of public resources, and improved service delivery. So improved labor productivity is not an option for this country, it is a must. And it is a must today, not tomorrow. And therefore, as we come to our end-term report, this is one of the key messages that we really want to emphasize, because it is not just about SRC, it is an area that can only be achieved in collaboration with all stakeholders in government. That labor productivity enhancement is not a choice, it is critical, and it's not for tomorrow, it is now, and Kenya will then realize those benefits that have elaborated, one of which is to reduce the wage bill to revenue ratio, amongst the other huge benefits to the citizens of Kenya. The other strategic pillar is to manage the wage bill, continuously managing the wage bill through the strategies that I elaborated earlier, that the Commission has continuously done and must continue to do. The other strategic pillar is controlling employee numbers. This one, the Commission does not have direct control, hence the importance of collaboration with other stakeholders. As I mentioned earlier, the growth of employee numbers, some of it is actually justifiable when you're increasing in the critical sectors of the economy, in security, health, education. but we also see employee numbers growing in areas where it is not adding value the way it should. In other words, there are many areas to do with employee numbers that speaks to optimal staffing levels. Do we have optimal staffing levels? Or are we recruiting in areas that we ought not to recruit? Are we recruiting the technical skills that are required or not? And the reason why the Commission takes this as an important part of its mandate is because it speaks to optimal utilization of resources, right? Then it's also about fit-for-purpose organizational structures. Sorry, these two are not within the purview of the Commission. It was discussed during the Wage Bill Conference and can only be realized with collaboration from other stakeholders. The other strategic pillar is leveraging technology. Leveraging technology is in three areas. One is payroll controls, and I'm happy that there is a resolution from the Wage Bill Conference, and you will see that in our end of term report around the payroll controls, why it's important. There is a lot of wastage that happens in the payroll today in Kenya, and that needs to be addressed urgently. Continuous monitoring and evaluation and wage bill forecasting tool. So that's another strategy that is key. The other one, in terms of the future outlook, the key ones, there are others that are in the report. Full implementation of the third wage bill conference resolutions. This is so critical in order to achieve the target of not more than 35% wage bill to revenue ratio. It can only be implemented in full collaboration of the stakeholders that were identified during the National Wage Bill Conference. The other one is productivity measurement and improvement in the public service. As I mentioned, it is not a choice, it is not tomorrow, it needs to be addressed now. Streamlining allowances in the public service, that is the responsibility of the Commission in collaboration with other stakeholders. It is also something that the Commission must continue to focus on. Progressive harmonization of remuneration and benefits, I've mentioned that earlier. We have not achieved, it needs to happen, and it will be achieved progressively. So that really comes to the end of my highlights of what the Commission has done during the 6 years, and I will now thank you for paying attention. It was a fairly long presentation, but thank you, and I'll now invite Leah. So thank you once again.